About jillion times, jillion times. That's a good word. They should bring it back.
I can see this as a major, it's a church. Basically.
Jillion.
I've been there a year. I just learned mailboxes.
You got
And the next thing I know, I live in.
How you did?
Good, how you doing?
I could be better, but I'm in the house.
Wouldn't do you.
Wouldn't do me a little bit. I always just like to leave a little room for the Lord to improve things if He wants to.
Oh, Rosa, yeah, I think she said she was
That's right.
going on ladies.
It's just, we just be deceived that it's always gonna be.
Hi guys, glad you're here. Come on in here.
No. Well, okay, that was, okay, Molly said, yeah, I think she's in the first line. Yeah. Yes, sure, sure. We think the truth and see, you know, what it's gonna do. Yes. That's Friday, okay. Oh, just give me this. And then you're going to another one. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. To get a parking place. Cause I asked, cause I've never, I mean, I've driven 5 and but never gone to the. And, because I was and she said, well, at the back, is, you know. She went and picked up, oh, yeah, well, yeah, exactly, or when you can't say, right, then when you're afraid you'll be took it off.
Well, I think we're on the same.
I think we are too, so.
Why do this?
Oh, well,
Still do it.
Enjoy it, I'm just getting the sound level here. Okay. I think that's all of that, okay? Just wanted to get that thing checked. I was having trouble yesterday with it. We'll get going in about 5 minutes here.
No worries.
Yeah, I know, we're there. It's hard to get used to saying that when you're young. 20 years old and older.
Hello, how are you?
I like your shirt.
Well, thank you, sir. You're the one, huh? Good to see you guys.
Where do you want to sit?
Little farmers over there.
Go over there and sit behind Mike, you'd be happy.
Somebody good, nice. They think a lot of me, don't they? Well, I don't want you to move.
Folks, let me just, well, maybe I better wait till we get started here to say this. Just give kind of an update on things. I'm so glad that you guys are all here this morning. Been looking forward to this. I'm glad you came back. And
I brought my mom with me.
I noticed that, yeah. I heard him bring his mom down the hallway and he was trying to help her figure out the route. He says, the guy down there in the funny shirt. I mean, I had to go to a funeral today. I thought I'd dress for it. What do you think?
I told him, I said, you'll know why I like this guy so much. And she says, how? And I said, well, he's the guy right down there in the very fun winter.
What, he's not a suit and tie?
Yeah, well, I could get a clip-on tie.
No.
Well,
No, but thank you very much.
listen, let me just go.
No.
Why don't we take just a minute before we get started here? Let me ask you a question. Are there any thoughts, comments, questions that you've had since we broke huddle yesterday about some of the things that we talked about yesterday? Anything at all?
I thought the discussion of personal responsibility was really interesting.
Yeah. What side did you come down on that, for or against?
Well, I'm the kind of person that takes his own responsibility, so I ended up in that direction.
Yeah. How many of you were not with us yesterday? Just so oh my gracious. Okay. So let me kind of give you a little bit of a heads up. For those of you that are repeat offenders, I'm going to have to kind of repeat myself a little bit here. Yesterday when we started the class, I just told everybody, I said, listen, not to be self-indulgent or narcissistic here, but to give you a little bit of my story here. Back in 1992, when I was still in my 30s, I was 39 years old, I was running what had grown to be a pretty successful company, group of companies in Nashville. Found myself headed to the hospital. Before I was out of there, they'd given me 5 heart bypasses. Let's just go ahead and leave that door open just for a few more minutes, okay? Just push it on open and we'll, that way, if anybody else wants to come, they can. If they don't, that's okay. We don't have noise in the hallway. But at any rate, I found myself having, these heart bypasses. After they were over, I got more bad news. Long story short, they gave me at the outside, about 2 years to live. Well, God had some other plans. And there was a prayer vigil that started for me. I recall this whole thing, because I had to go back to the doctor about a week later at Vanderbilt, basically for them to tell me how to get ready to die. And the cool thing was, when I came back, they were just all stunned. They said, listen, we keep looking at your videos day after day, and it's like every morning we look at these, and they're totally different. They're better than they were the day before. So more tests followed. Long story short, this debilitating disease of mine was actually getting better all the time. Progressive disease was getting better all the time. And then as recently as about 3 or 4 months ago, I think it was in October, I went in for an arteriogram that they've been wanting me to do now for over 20 years. I just been putting it off. They were concerned, very concerned, that I would have some real bad closures. All of my bypasses are going and blowing at 100%. Medical people don't have any understanding of what's happened here. But God has given me a lease on life, and it has given me a passion that led me, among other things, to sell my companies back in 2000 and begin working with churches. That's what I do as a full-time job. And simply getting to share Jesus with people the best way I know how to. I tell people that my goal now is to go from some success that I may have had to some significance that I'll hope I'll have going forward. I'm 71 years old. I feel great, and God is good, and I'm just glad every time I get to be in front of people, especially those of you who have impactful positions on the churches where you worship and where you are. So at any rate, thank you so much for being here this morning, and forgive me for repeating that for those of you that were here yesterday. Yesterday we began our journey talking. This is not going to work again today. There we go. It just works what it feels like, I've noticed. Yesterday we began a course going through 15 of what I'm calling more leadership concepts. These are on top of 14 that I shared with you last year. But this year, for an increasingly challenging culture. Folks, we're living in a tougher and tougher culture all the time. One of the important points I made yesterday, and I'm not going to repeat everything, don't worry about that, but I do want to get everybody kind of on the same level. Today there is a battle going on in the culture. We all know this, but to make it a little bit more succinct, it is a battle that goes on between people of different worldviews. Now there are lots of other factors that I'm not going to have time to talk about in here. But one of the big ones has to do with our age and when we grew up. As I said yesterday, those of us in the room here that are well over 50, we grew up in the age of what is known as modernity, the age of modernism. It goes back about 300 or 400 years. It was the age of reason, when people were told things, and we came to the understanding that if you got enough facts, stacked them on top of each other, you would come to a clear conclusion. Didn't matter how you felt about it, fact was fact was fact. If you're much under 50, you have grown up in a postmodern world where everybody has told you that your truth is your truth and my truth is my truth, and don't ever interrupt anybody else's feelings on anything. Don't offend anybody. Don't presume that you have any knowledge that's any greater or worse than someone else's. Now, I told you yesterday that I agree with both sides of this. I agree with modernists who say, yes, there is such a thing as absolute truth, absolutely. But on the other side, I'm very, very sympathetic to my millennial, pardon me, I've got some going in my throat. My millennial, my Z friends who say, well, Steve, if you got all the truth, then why in the world don't you guys act like it? Why don't you show a little bit more compassion, a little more sensitivity? And I think there's a point in that. So if we're going to deal with the world around us, that's something that we pretty much have to kind of understand as a base point, a starting point. Now, yesterday we looked at the first 8 of these 15 concepts. Today we're going to kick off and get into the next one here. This is part 2, that's right, but let's get on to the first one here. First thing I want to share this morning, and again, as I told everybody yesterday, these are ad hoc concepts. I call these thought sparklers. They're designed to simply get us thinking about things. This is not a Bible study in here today. I want to be totally clear about that. I am an equipper. My job is to equip the saints. And today I'm really trying to give you some ideas, some things that you can kind of file back in your brain. And that way, when you're dealing with people in the world, you'll be able to pull some of these out and begin using these as little toolkits that will really improve things. One of the things we have to understand is this: perception and reality are not the same thing, but they are. Now let me show you what I mean by that. Take a look. Now, you now have a perception of what you just saw, correct? All right. You have a perception. Here's my question. Did you really see what you saw? No. Take a look at this. That's a little bit confusing, a little bit mind-bending, isn't it? Here's the fact. The fact is, a person's perception is their reality. That's true. Whatever your perception is your reality. Number 2, perception, though, is not necessarily reality. Can we get that? And here's the big point here. Great leaders get this. As a leader, as an individual who encourages, inspires, focuses other people around you, one of the things you have to do is get into their boots and figure out where they are, what their perceptions are. They may be totally diametrically opposed to what we believe to be truth, okay? But that is truth to that person. And our job as leaders is to help that person filter through these things. Help them see the other side of the fence and begin to realize the validity of the other side of the fence. And
without
getting
imposing
upset.
your perception on it.
Well, that's a great way to
Is
say
that a
it.
fair statement?
Yeah, that's a fair statement. And who is to say that my side of the fence is correct either? And again, to me, the ultimate authority, the non-debatable authority is Scripture.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I land on. And so what I'm saying is, we are today talking to people in this world that are very, very confused people in a way that they have never been before. Used to be back in the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, and even to some degree in the 80s and the 90s, there was some sanity out there. People kind of agreed on some principles, right? And even it's what I used to call gray Christianity. It was that all of America was Christian in a gray sense. I mean, it was that virtually everybody kind of had respect for the church. They kind of had respect for the Bible. They might not obey it. They might not follow it. They might not even claim to be Christian. But they had a general respect. And our laws, of course, were all predicated on the Scriptures themselves, Old and New Testaments. Well, now that's all been called into question. Even our laws, I mean, there's a real push for our laws to be rethought so that they do not coin themselves from Judeo-Christian ethic anymore. I mean, there's a lot of push on them from different sides on that. There's all of this that's going on. So these days, when we get up and we're talking to somebody, whether it's in a group or just grabbing a lunch with them, or maybe it's that guy at the stock market that we see all the time that hardly speaks English, how do we communicate? And Christians, I've got to tell you, they're going to be playing on their own reality. And it's our job to help them rethink their reality. But how do we do that? Let me ask, I'm opening this up for some questions and comments today. How do we do that? How do we get people to step past their reality? Yes, sir.
Example?
Good. Example? What else?
Just like you said, the Bible is a very good way of closing that gap.
Right.
And even in the Scriptures, Old Testament, come let us reason together.
Right.
That's the part, is that having a conversation and being able to listen with an attitude of saying, I want to hear everything you have to say. And I'm going to be open, and I'm going to accept it, and I'm going to repeat it back, just so I can say that you were successfully explaining to me your side.
Aggressively listening. That's what you're saying.
Yeah,
I agree with that so much.
But now you need to hear I want you to hear what I think.
Well,
too.
yes, but I've got to say something to you. I'm going to take issue with you on something here.
Okay.
And I could be wrong, but I don't think the Bible's the answer in cases like this.
Okay.
And here's why. If the other person doesn't agree that the Bible is authoritative, how are we going to convince him that what the Bible tells him is what he ought to do? Yes, sir.
Excellent point.
Kind of like you did with that picture, we need to look into their beliefs and show them what's behind it.
That's right. That's exactly what it is. And remember, Jesus very rarely used Scripture. Now, he did occasionally. Sometimes, especially dealing with Jewish leaders, he might default and go back to Old Testament Scripture. But generally, Jesus didn't do that. Jesus did what? He told what? Stories. We call them parables. That's what we have got to be better at doing. That's how this relational stuff works. It's a matter of, this morning when I told you the story about my background, I hope it didn't sound like I was in any way bragging. There's nothing to brag about there. But did you feel any more sense of relationship with me? I hope you did. Mm-hmm. And you see, this is what we need to be willing and open to doing. Yes, sir.
So for me, my experience, and my wife working with people, we have a ministry that we work with broken people, because like you've already told us, we live in a broken world. For us, we have to build some kind of relationship. We have to have something in common with people. And usually, if we listen closely enough,
right,
you're going to hear some brokenness in some way.
Yeah.
Their divorce, there's something in a debt, their addiction, and I agree 100%. I don't take the Bible and start screaming about Jesus. I get to know the person.
Yes.
And someone said example, they're looking at a person's behavior more than they're listening to their words.
Absolutely.
Usually.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
then the third thing I'll quit is have a place where people feel safe to come, we do a lot of small groups. And let them know that no one's there to judge them, no one's there to do anything but love them. And so that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Good point. Yes, sir. We'll take this last one and go on to the next.
I don't know, I think this might be connected. I was like raised in a church, okay?
Yeah.
But it's when I read C.S. Lewis's book, Miracles, that I was cured of incipient materialistic view of life. I don't know, it just seems like we assume people have the same outlook that we had.
Right.
You know, but there's, I don't know.
Backgrounds vary, don't they?
He didn't prove there were miracles. He proved that miracles were possible.
Yeah.
And so people don't have actually, sometimes in our evangelism, we skipped who Jesus is and why we believe who he is, and we jump right into what they need to do to be saved without knowing anything about the Savior.
That's right. Thank you. That brings us to a good close on this. That is a good comment. I want to just ask us to remember, we have to remember this. The longer a person has held on to any belief, the harder it's going to be for that person to change that belief, even when confronted with compelling, even undeniable evidence to the contrary. Can we remember that? And you can shoot pictures of anything we got up here, please feel free to. But the longer a person's held on to any belief, good, bad, or indifferent, the harder it's going to be for that person to change that belief, even in the face of compelling, inevitable, contradictive evidence. Okay?
That's also true for you, right?
It's true for what?
For you.
Yes, sir. Me too.
We have,
I don't believe what I believed 5 years ago about God.
No.
And if God lets me live again for another 5 years, I think I'll probably change on a few other things. That's just the way it is.
It's called maturity.
Well, I hope so. I hope so. And so it's static. Or I should say, it's dynamic, and it should be. It should be a growing thing. Now, here's another little thing maybe we need to think about before we get ourselves into trouble. Is don't do stupid stuff. One of the real reasons that Christians get themselves into trouble is we just put our foot in it all the time. We do dumb things. We lose our temper. We carry on badly sometimes, and then we wonder why our impact isn't any better. Fact is, sometimes we can earn those critics that we have, okay?
Yes. Yeah.
And sometimes, if you've earned a critic, it's best to go back to that critic and apologize for real, and change the way we're doing a few things. Here's a good example. This was at a Taco Bell. Just look at this photograph for a minute. Anybody see anything wrong with this picture?
I do.
Well, tell me what it is.
The manager's parking right by the door.
Yeah, the manager's got himself the best parking place for a drive-in fast food retailer. Really? I mean, really? I go to churches sometimes. This has not happened at any churches of Christ, but I do go to some other churches. And I've gone to congregations, churches, where I come up and the best parking place would be the pastor's parking place. And I'm thinking, oh, okay. And I understand, I mean, I've asked about that, and people have told me, well, it's a way we have of honoring our pastor. And I get that. I understand that, okay? But let me just tell you something. As a minister, I would not prefer to have, I'm a minister on the staff of the Antioch Church of Christ in Nashville, have been for over 20 years now. There's no parking place for me. And one of the things that we tend to do is try to park a ways off from the building. The thing is, it just doesn't seem seemly to me. Here's another photograph I thought you might like to see. Here was a guy that decided he had to make some midday notes. Look where he parks his truck. I mean, dumb stuff. And that's the kind of thing that causes people like me to shoot pictures of guys like that to show to audiences like you. I mean, really, that is not smart stuff. That's what gets. Here's what we need to remember: don't do the dumb things that give other people reasons to criticize you. That's what's going to get you into trouble every single time. So, at any rate, there we go. Now we need to pick up on the 11th concept here, and this is one. And by the way, I don't know that there was anything to be talked about on that last one. Does anybody have any comments on not being stupid? I mean, are we all in agreement we don't need to do that?
I started to put up a sign where I preached that said, this is the preacher's parking spot. If you park here, you preach.
Well, now there you go. There you go. Little humor might get you through that one. Here's the 11th concept. Folks, if we're going to do what we're supposed to be doing, we have got to become ferocious forgivers.
Absolutely great.
I rode over here this morning in an Uber with a nice guy. He was a Latino, and we were visiting. His English was perfect, so I had no issue with that. I could understand. He could understand me. And we were laughing, and I asked him, I said, do you do this full time? He says, no. He says, I do it part time. I do it in the morning before I start my job. I said, really, what is your job? He says, I'm a house painter. I said, really? Well, that's neat. Tell me about it. He said, I just enjoy doing it and all, but most days. He says, today not so much. I said, what happened? He said, I got out, came down to my truck. Somebody had stolen the paint I was going to use on the job today. Oh, I'm thinking, oh, good. He lost a gallon of paint. I said, how much he lost? He says, 2 5-gallons. And I'm thinking, and here he is, hustling to make a few dollars to get us money to buy some new paint. Now, he's not a bit happy about what happened, but he was taking it better than a lot of Christian brothers that I've known would have. And this is something we have to, I really think we need to focus on. Being people who rush to forgive other people. Does anybody in here enjoy watching some of those TV shows, crime shows, you know, where some crime is committed and the show is figuring out who did it? I mean, for real shows. Yeah, I kind of like those. And one of the things that I find interesting is how people who have been victimized respond to the bad guy. I mean, and there's usually a lot of hatred, a lot of anger. They're really wanting to extract a pound of flesh. And by the way, I am all for punishment. I mean, I'm not easygoing on these things. I'm in favor of capital punishment. Okay, so for all that. But what I have noticed over the years is that the people in these episodes who are victims, who actually happen to be true blue Christians, and you can kind of tell this in many cases by their temperament, long before you learn the rest of this story, you kind of notice that these people seem to be more balanced. Things are working a little better in their life. Then you learn what happens at the end. They forgive the bad guy. Mm-hmm. That's what Jesus does. By the way, you don't forgive other people just for that other person, right? You do it for yourself on 2 levels. Number 1, it makes it easier for you. And number 2, so you can go to heaven. Is that blunt enough? What did Jesus say? If you don't forgive others, I won't forgive what? Yeah, pretty serious stuff here. This is a buddy of mine, Joey Spann. Joey's a preacher at the Burnett Chapel Church of Christ in Antioch, Tennessee. Antioch's a suburb of Nashville, just a few miles away from our congregation, the Antioch Church of Christ. And in September of 17, that was the Sunday morning that a shooter came walking across the parking lot, shot and murdered one of the members of the church, going into the church building, walked inside, shot the place up, several people, including Joey. He almost killed Joey. And Joey was in the hospital for a good while, actually, trying to get through that. I had an opportunity to visit with Joey, and I remember I just asked Joey, I said, Joey, how are you doing with this forgiveness thing? And I love this. He said, Steve, how can I not forgive when I need so much forgiveness myself? Now that's a God thing right there, okay? You don't get that unless you know Jesus. You just don't. But that's what we're called to do. And that's what we need to be about as individuals. We need to be the first people out of the block to forgive others. Now, I've said my piece on this. What comments do we have?
There's a lot in Ephesians chapter 4, the last verse. Paul talks about them being kind one to another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another as God for Christ's sake has forgiven you. And I find that verse is helping me a lot.
Yes.
There's also no statute of limitations. There's not a time limit. The forgiveness that needs to come sometimes might require for you to sit on it for a little while. I mean, what I mean by that is that it helps with the healing process, but you might have to, if depending on what it is, I think it's okay for you to be saying to God, God, I'm not ready to forgive that yet, but I want to.
Yes. Yes.
And when that time comes, and when that happens, it probably becomes more meaningful and more sincere.
Thank you. Sister, did you have something? Okay, anybody else? Yes, sir, brother.
Went through a divorce, and there's a lot that goes on in divorces. And when I counsel with people that are thinking about going through it, the one thing I'll tell them is you absolutely have to forgive her or him, because you cannot move forward.
Yeah.
You cannot get into a new relationship. And although it's commanded that we forgive, I think the commandment is there because I need you to grow and I need you to mature. And when you hold on to this stuff, that doesn't happen.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. It's like eating your own poison, isn't it? Okay, I've got something here that I really just want to throw out for comments. This is a comment from Matt Dabbs. But the question is this: did you know that our culture, I said Matt Dabbs, this is Matt Chandler, that our culture has been inoculated from the gospel. Now that is the only slide I have on this. So I want us to chat about this a little bit. I want us to compare some notes. What does that mean?
It's an interesting choice of words. I've never thought about it that way before, but yeah, I see.
It's a way of not offending people. You can inoculate them when someone comes in, they don't know what you believe, they'll come there. Sometimes that's the case. You're inoculated from being offended. You go to church.
Huh. Hadn't thought about it that way. Yes, sir.
The Church of Christ used to be the children of the book. They used to be the ones that knew the Bible really well. And now it's in the process of being changed. And I'm just wondering what it's going to change into. You talk about inoculated from the gospel. It was a whole different world back 100 years ago. We had nationalism and all this stuff going on and the wars and everything. And yet, you know, you wonder, how is it different? What's going on? It makes it so strange.
Let me define inoculated from the gospel the way I understand the writer to me. I believe what he's saying is that the culture out here has had an inoculation, just enough of the gospel so that they don't catch it.
Yeah.
That's what I think he's saying. Now, if that is what he's trying to communicate, what does that mean? And how has that happened?
A little knowledge is a dangerous thing sometimes.
Okay. The other thoughts?
What was your question again?
Well, the writer here is suggesting that that the public, the communities around us, nationwide, have been inoculated from the gospel in the sense that they've been given just enough of the gospel to inoculate them so they won't get any more of it.
So we're the disease.
Well, are we?
Inoculations are supposed to be good for you.
Yeah.
Well, but think about how
I mean,
inoculations
that's
work.
how I've always
Well, the polio inoculation, when we were kids, they gave you just a little bit of polio so you wouldn't really get the disease, right?
yeah.
So,
Flu shot.
so how is this culture given, how has the church in today's culture given the culture just enough Christianity so that they won't want any more?
It's incomplete for one.
What?
It's incomplete.
Okay.
There's
Well, I think, you know, growing up in the church, grace wasn't talked about.
Yeah.
And it is today, and thank the Lord that it is.
Yes.
But love and grace are talked about, which of course is Christianity. But a lot of the in-depth study of the scriptures is not presented from the pulpit anymore.
Okay.
In my opinion.
Okay.
I think the whole concept is that I'm okay, you're okay, we're all going to the same place. We all believe in Jesus. And so it becomes an accepted thing. And people who say, yes, but you need to, whatever it may be, someone talking about having deeper knowledge of the scriptures or what needs to become, then that is reversed to say that you're, you're being you know, too harsh, too hard. You have your interpretation, I have my interpretation, so, everybody's going to heaven. Yeah, in fact, I've never been to a funeral that anybody's going to hell. Nobody's going to hell. Nobody says anything about that.
You know, when I see that quote, I think of, I hear what you're saying, but I'm seeing what you're doing. And if what you're saying leads to
Thank
what
you.
you're doing, I don't want nothing to do with it.
Say that again.
Yeah.
If you say one thing and do another thing, they're gonna say, if that's what your teaching leads to, I don't wanna have no part.
Brother, you've just hit the nail on the head. We've been talking all around it here, but that is the point. The point is this: this culture out here has seen just enough Christianity to say, I don't want it.
Exactly.
Or I don't need it.
Or I don't need it. Absolutely. Because they've seen so many hypocrites. They've seen Christians acting the same way as the people in the world do. Let me tell you something. Back about, it's been almost 2 years ago now. Bonnie and I, by the way, we live in Nashville. We live in the southern side of the city in an area called Brentwood. And we have a nice home there, been there for decades. But about 2 years ago, I went down about 50 miles south and found an area literally in the middle of the woods, and decided that I was going to build a home there, a retreat. And I've been working on it now for 2 years, and it's done. But I mean, we have our own well, our own septic system, we have our own solar power. I mean, we are totally self-sufficient to the degree that we want to be. And it has been a marvelous trek. I mean, it's been a lot of big learning curve. I built an office building in Nashville once, thought I knew something about building. I had never had to put in roads before, and I never had to mess with septic systems, but I've learned a lot. But in this process, I hired a crew of Mennonites to do most of my home building for me, okay? And I watched those people from the get-go. The first day I met with, well, one of the first days that I met with the guy that was in charge, his name was Josh, McClug, I couldn't think. Josh McClug. Josh is, at that point, he was 28 years old, looked like he was going on 40. And Josh and I just hit it off. And I said, Josh, what kind of contract are we going to do? And he said, well, I'll bring my contract over to you. So next time we were together, of course, they don't use cell phones or anything else. They don't do emails, so it has to be brought. So he hands me this 8.5 by 11-inch sheet of paper. On one side is everything, and it doesn't even fill the full side, and it's double spaced. And there's like 6 or 8 points on it. Nothing to do with the price, nothing to do with the specs or anything else. But there are some points. Like one of the points I remember was, if the work environment becomes dangerous, an example, bad language, we have the right not to continue working.
Wow.
And I looked at him and I said, well, talk to me for a minute here. What happens if I don't pay you? He said, well, if you don't pay me, I'll go to the other brothers and they will give me money to help me get started again. I said, will you sue me? He said, no, we won't sue you. And I've signed a lot of thick contracts over the years. I signed that one like without another hesitant moment, just here. And we talked about it. I mean, I drew out plans, generally what I wanted, gave it to him, and he said, "Well, it'll cost you this much," and that's what we did. It was as simple as that. And in that experience, though, I worked with these guys, and I noticed quite a number of things. They were how separated from the world they really are. And I'll tell you something, I'm not critical of them at all. I simply am not. I don't think you have to be quite as extreme, but I'd a whole lot rather be that way than the way a lot of Christians are today. That are wearing the same kind of clothes that our culture wears, that are playing the same music, that are talking the same way, that are interested in the same shallow stuff. I mean, this is not the way Christians should be. And when the people out here that have their own screwed up problems of every kind are looking at Christians that are living the same way they are, they say, well, man, what's the difference? Except I'd have to go to church and tithe. I mean, really, what's the difference? Makes a big difference. Yes, sir.
Brother, on the inoculations, I believe we are inoculated through politics a lot. You don't talk about your faith, I mean, a lot of companies will not even allow their employees to talk about their faith, or talk about Jesus, or it's all just hush hush, you believe what you want to believe, I'll believe what I want to believe. And I believe we've been inoculated from opening up conversations that would just, and not just about Jesus, but just talking about morals and immorality, and because we become pegged as judges if we talk about someone being a homosexual or trans,
Yeah.
what all that stuff is. But I think that the God of this world is drenching our minds with propaganda to wash us down.
Good point. Hey, listen, I meant to mention this yesterday, and you just reminded me again. There's a great book out there. I say it's a great book. Bonnie and I are on like the 4th chapter, okay? It could go south, but we're enjoying this so far. And it's a book by Rubel Shelley. Have any of you seen this book?
What's the name?
Man and Woman, I think it is, God Created Them.
No, I've got his book.
Something very close to that. You need to get that book. It's on the whole LGBTQ thing. And so far what he's saying, and Rubel, and listen, I'm not going to apologize to anybody here. Rubel and I are best friends. We've been best friends for 40 years. And I don't always agree on things, okay? But he is a wonderful thinker. That book is a book that makes total sense, that at least from what we've read so far. And you might want to get a copy of that if you're interested in this topic.
What was the name again?
You'll have to check. Man and Woman, God Created Them,
Okay.
or something very close to that.
Okay.
They did an interview with Christian Chronicle. this
Probably
year.
so, yeah, probably
About
so.
it. So it's current.
Yes, it's a very current book. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
It's all interesting. I have a very extensive experience with Mennonites and Amish. I've been to their schools as a teacher. They would invite me in to tell stories, tell stories. And it makes my hair stand on end here to tell you, my father-in-law had cancer. The family comes down into the living room, and they're a big family, like 7 kids, all sat in chairs. Not a sound. They sing to my father-in-law, and they pray for him before he goes to have surgery. That's the tip of the iceberg of what I have seen of these people. When I walk in their school, 32 kids. Now, I was a public school teacher for 21 years. I've seen fights, I've seen blood on the halls, I've seen them put handcuffs, police come in a classroom and put handcuffs on kids, okay? I'm sitting in this classroom, 32 kids, 1st grade through 8th grade, 2 teachers. You don't hear a sound, you don't hear a sound. And I watched the best lessons I ever saw in their life. No homework. I said, why no homework? They said, well, they got chores. That's like, I was raised on a farm, I know all about that too. But anyway, so I won't say much more except that it really touches my heart when you mention that, because of all the things. And then over the years, the kids come down and, you need us to trim that tree for you. Can we mow your yard? And so the kids are taught to do something service, as they're growing up, to be helping other people and stuff like that, And so then as they got older, they would bring pies down. In the summer, they bring everything out of their garden down, and they bring it down to mom and dad and so on. Then the Mennonites, we had them do work on our house, and the guy said, just hand them your key.
There you go.
You don't have to worry about that.
You
The
can
level
do
of
it.
efficiency by the Mennonites is unbelievable.
Now, I bought
So
a.
why don't we live like Mennonites? Thus live more like Jesus?
Yeah.
That's the question. Let me take you to this next one. Guys and girls, we're all getting a few miles on the odometer in here, okay? So let me just say a couple things about that. One of the great callings in my life anyways is to make sure that I make every minute count. About a week ago, I got real sick, had the flu. It got real bad for a couple of days, and then it got real good just before I left town. For 2 or 3 days, I was told that I wasn't contagious or I wouldn't be here. And you know, the thing is, during the time that I was feeling sick, the thing that bugged me the most is I wasn't able to do anything. I love doing it. I love working. I love getting out and teaching. Anything I can do. When I go to a church, it excites me. I have to date, I've been in over 630 different churches of Christ around the world. Teaching, preaching, training leadership with the Leadership Summit that I do, and training Christian money management with the No Debt, No Sweat seminar. We'll talk to you a little bit more about that in a minute in the form of a very open plug for myself. I'm going to do that in a few minutes. But the thing is, I love being busy. I like that. And I think the key to a lot of it is to make sure that we make every moment count in everything we do. And we don't use excuses of getting older not to do it. One of my best friends and a mentor to me was a fellow by the name of Alan Bryan. Does anybody remember Alan Bryan?
Oh, yeah.
Alan Bryan was one of my best buddies. And even when he was too sick to do anything, he was at home on his phone day in and out, calling and encouraging people. That's what I want to be like. I want to go down swinging. If you ever hear about me rushing through the Dallas airport and having a heart attack and falling on the floor and dying, just say praise God, because that's what I want to be doing. I want to be doing something for the Lord and building something that's better than it is, okay? That's my goal. Good example of this, and I love this story. Back in the Second War, when the Germans had hit Poland especially with their blitzkrieg, they were planning to come south towards France. And as they were coming, they were capturing prisoners, putting them in their prison factories, and among these were quite a number of French prisoners. Well, these factories were the factories where they were building, these bombs right here. Well, the French prisoners pretty quickly realized these are the bombs they're wanting us to build to drop on France when they get there. It wasn't long before the Germans began to notice something when these bombs were being dropped. Most of them were not exploding. So the Germans went out into the fields to do some field studies. They found some of these unspent bombs, began to open them up, and they noticed something. Actually, they noticed two things. Number one, the wiring wasn't hooked up inside. And number two, there was a note inside of many of these bombs. And the note, among other things, was saying this over and over again. We are doing the best we can where we are with all we've got every chance we get. And I'm thinking maybe that's what we ought to be doing, right? Doing the best Steve Diggs can where he is with all I've got with every chance I get. I mean, and again, I don't want to offend or upset anybody in here. People have different ideas about him, but Pat Boone is a good friend of mine. Pat is 89 years old, and he is still going and blowing like no one's business. He is involved in 100 different things all the time, and I look at that. If God lets me live that long, I want to be like that. I want to be that person who is moving and grooving and doing the best he can going forward. So that brings me to number 14. Quitting, Christians, is for quitters. Want to be a quitter? Be a quitter. But admit it, okay? You see, people who just kind of roll up the sidewalks of their lives and begin to forget about everything but themselves, I think are the most miserable people anywhere. Old age, it's about more than just having a drool cup, lap blanket, or put these things in the jar at nighttime, okay? I call this early onset spiritual Alzheimer's right here, okay? I don't want to die like this. I don't want to be this person. And by the way, old age does have a few perks. Let me just give you a couple of them here. Number one, kidnappers are not interested in you anymore. Number two, in a hostage situation, you'll be the first one released. They don't want you. Number three, no one expects you to run anywhere these days. Number four, people call at 8 p.m. and ask, did I wake you? Number five, people no longer view you as a hypochondriac. It's for real. Number six, clothes you buy now won't wear out. Number seven, you can live without sex, but not without your glasses. Number eight, your supply of brain cells is down to a manageable level. Number nine, there's nothing left for you to learn the hard way. And number 10, you're too old to come up with a 10th point. So I guess that's me there. Folks, let's use our time and our age, our opportunities the way we should. We really need to do that. The question is, do we want to be rivers or reservoirs? Are we going to be a river that receives blessings upstream but shares them with everybody that we can, passing them on? Or do we want to be a reservoir that selfishly holds on to everything we get, never trusting the upstream source? And then that becomes stagnant and dead, doesn't bless anybody, and we have a mess in our own lives. Just don't want to live like that. Paul said, and let us not grow weary in doing good, for in due season we will reap if we do not give up. You know, there's that imperative that Jesus talks about, not giving up, not giving up. Don't give up, Christians. For all you know, and this is from an old Bill Gaither song, for all you know, the Master may be standing up right now to give the call that'll end it all. So keep on walking.
Amen.
You don't know how far you've come. Keep on walking. So, what kind of thinker are you? Here's the deal. Everybody in the universe has a universal desire. What is the number one desire, do you suppose, that everybody on the planet has? To be, there you go. You hit the nail on the head. To be happy. And you say, well, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense, Steve. Some people commit suicide. Yeah, they're doing that to be happy. That may be a very misguided decision, but that's why they're doing it. The one goal that everybody has, no ifs, ands, or buts, no exceptions, no exclusions. Everybody on this planet wants to be happy. Two ways of thinking about happiness. Your happiness is totally dependent on which of these two ways you choose to go about it. Which one of the sides of the line you choose to be on determines your success or your failure. What it boils down to is the difference between short-term and long-term thinking. Now, Christians, we're living in a world that is about short-term thinking, but what I've learned is that every failure in my life has been the outcome of my own short-term thinking. I've never been happy from short-term thinking. As a matter of fact, here's what I believe. I believe that almost anything that I do that feels good immediately is going to make me unhappy in the future. Yep. And virtually anything that I don't like initially is going to make me very happy as the years go by.
Can you give us some examples?
Well, I will. Thank you for asking. We default, let me do this first, I'll get into that because I want to show you what I'm talking about. We default to short-term thinking mainly because it's the easy thing to do. Our culture everywhere around us does it. You know, it's instant gain, no pain, that's the whole idea. And it's also very, very profitable for the merchants. Here's an example of what I'm talking about. How many of you have seen this counter at Walmart as you go to the checkout line?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do you know what retailers call this? They call it the impulse counter. They know that people that are getting their money ready to pay for whatever they bought in the store, they see candy bars, they see little big pens, they see big lighters, they see all these things. They're liable to grab something for another $1 or $2 or $3 and throw it in. It's usually not something that we even need. You buy a 200 or 300 or 400 calorie candy bar for $2 or $3. It tastes good until we get it down, and then we think, I shouldn't have eaten that thing. And we've wasted the money and we got the extra calories, right? Well, this is the way the world works. It tastes good up front. It feels good at the moment. But in the long run, we're not happy we did it, right? That's the world we live in. And Christians, this gets back to what I talked about yesterday. It's that differential advantage thing. Now, if you weren't with me yesterday, for 25 years, I ran a large advertising agency and radio TV production company in Nashville. And one of the things we talked to our clients about all the time was their differential advantage. A client or an advertiser to be successful with any product has to have something that is A, different, and B, advantageous over the competitors. What is it that makes you different and better than the competition? And if you can't answer those questions, then you need to quit trying. You need to go back and do something different. You need to find a new product or something else, okay? Our differential advantage that I roll out here that is all short-term thinking, when they see that we do things differently, we don't get ourselves into debt and live that way for the rest of our lives. We don't make dumb decisions in our marriages. We don't feel any compunction to buy our kids all the hip new stuff that only makes them worse people inside. And us broker in the process. When they start to see that we think, tick, and do differently than they do, they're going to begin to look at us. They're going to ridicule us. That's a given at first. But then they're going to begin to wonder, maybe those people know something I don't know. Maybe those people have some wisdom that I don't have, that I sure would like to have. You know, we talk all we want to about the fancy cars and the dollars and the stoplights. But when we live a life when we're buying cars that we don't need with money we don't have to impress people we don't know, it's kind of pointless, isn't it? And as we get older, have any of the rest of you noticed this? As you're getting older, are some of the things that used to dazzle you so much in this world just not very important anymore?
Mm-hmm.
Some of them feel kind of shallow, actually. Yeah. It's kind of where I am. 3 quick thought sparklers. Low knowledge and low impulse control is a disaster waiting to happen. There are a lot of people out here who have low knowledge and very low impulse control. All winners do so by keeping their eyes on the prize and by focusing on the long-term goal. I do have one final thing I want to share with you here. This is kind of a bonus point, but here it is. Do a checkup from the neck up. Make sure you do that. Always look at yourself, reevaluate yourself. Do not be so worried about everybody else. Make sure that you're where you need to be in life. Ask yourself, what sort of person am I? Why do I do what I do? And why do I wear a mask? And by the way, we all wear a mask, right? There are 2 reasons to wear a mask, by the way. One is to hide ourselves from other people. That's a bad reason. The other is to protect us, not to harm other people. That's a good reason. We all have masks on. Why are you wearing your mask? And maybe if it's simply to hide ourselves and not to be honest, forthright people, maybe we need to get rid of that mask. And I'm not saying that you tell everybody every horrible thing you can think of about yourself. There are some things maybe we need to confess to a Christian brother or sister. But no, we don't go out doing that. I'm not saying that. But let's not pretend to be something we're not, okay? Let's not pretend to be that Christian guy that everybody knows doesn't live like a Christian. That's important. And I've fought that battle in my own life and not always won it. 2 questions. Am I determined to do the right thing? And more importantly, am I doing the right thing for the right reason? That's what I want to do. And that's what I want to make my life work at. Motive matters. And Christians, I can't speak that highly enough. In our fellowship, you brought out that we were very legalistic, and we were. We used to talk about it doesn't matter what you're doing unless you're doing the right thing. Well, I do agree with that up to a point. But I don't think that doing the right thing necessarily is going to get us there. It's the matter of the heart. And we've got to be people of the heart. That's the way God built us. And I think that's what we need to be about. If you think about it, for about 1,700 years, virtually nobody in this world ever saw or read a Bible. There were a few high church people who did. So how did this thing of ours, how did Christianity hang together? It hung together because Christians were living like Christians and sharing it with other people. And maybe that's what we need to do. I'm all for reading the Bible, don't misunderstand me. But it's more a lifestyle. It's a matter of heart and where we're at. I've enjoyed getting to be with everybody. I'm going to make a shameless plug like I told you. And if you want to talk for a few minutes, I'm going to have to leave pretty quickly to get to the airport. But I will tell you very quickly that if you're interested in learning more about the No Debt,